Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode where we learn, discover new paths of knowledge. As we've been learning about necromancy, let's just dig deep upon that subject as we have already had an introduction on the subject. If you have not had it, please go back to watch the first episode, which actually gives an introduction on necromancy. So today I would like to actually go into the spiritual, or say the religious aspects, as people like to call it nowadays. Spirituality is no more called spirituality, it's called religion. So let us look into the religious aspects of necromancy, starting with actually when I gone into this. There's a lot of information that I can actually give you on each and every religious outlook, so we can actually have a lot of them, and saying each of them separately will actually do some better good, I guess. And this is not it. Once if I say about a religious outlook, that doesn't mean that's the end of it. If I have an additional information that I get later on regarding to that, I'll surely adapt another time. As of today, let us do the religious outlook on necromancy from the biblical perspective, the Christian perspective. So when I actually learned about this in the light of the biblical perspective, I actually came across two situations of necromancy references that are there in the Bible. So it's actually more than two. Okay, I'm sorry, it's actually more than two, but I have not been successful in getting every one of them, but I would like to tell you all that I have got. So first of all, let me make it clear that Bible doesn't support the practice of necromancies, where at the same time it actually provides proof of its existence. Where in the previous session I actually told you about the literate references, the references of necromancy in literature, starting from the Odysseys to many more recent novels by Stephen King, etc. There has been lot of literature references of necromancy's existence. People may or may not believe it. Some people doubt the some people doubt the genuinity of this, the success of this. But let me just tell you, it is famous. It is quite popular right from the time of its introduction. So Bible doesn't support this practice, as it's a black magic practice, and but Bible actually provides certain proofs of its existence in the past. So tracing into the Bible history from the Old Testament, we can actually see God's warning towards Israelites when they were going to get into the land of Canaan. God had actually given them a strict warning against the pagan practices of that land. So these pagan practices included necromancy, which in the word it is written consulting the dead. Yes, if you want to have a more detailed reference, I can actually give you the reference point, the book of Deuteronomy from the Bible, chapter 18 verses 9, 10 and 11. So in that actually God makes it clear what all should be avoided. All those practices that the pagan land dwellers have should not go in unto them, or they should not graze it by any means, but rather let them live according to what laws and rules that God has said. They have been given a set of rules and laws and festivals. God actually wants them to go according to that. So in that we can actually see God has actually mentioned necromancy, which is consulting the dead. So we can actually see that necromancy actually existed. So I'll just tell you another situation in the Bible which actually further goes into this subject. Okay, so I guess most of everyone is quite familiar with the story of King David, who when he was a little kid actually killed a giant who was twice or thrice his size. So King David became king because the former king that was before him, of course, King Saul, had fallen out with God. So it is with the King Saul that we have this necromancy encounter that is written in the Bible. So first I had read through this portion. I have actually read through this portion many times, but it is actually when we learn something new. It's not because we don't get any material profits, but when we learn something new, certain things that we have learned or certain things that we have known from the past gets a more deeper meaning, gets a more deeper insight. We get a different enlightenment when we learn about such things. It is not for any material profit. Learning is learning. You actually discover something new and it actually blows your mind. That is what we call learning is. That is when our mind is enlightened to learn. And when we learn like this, actually I'll tell you, this will actually stay for years and years. This will not require you to come back every week or every month. You needn't even revise it. You needn't even go through it anytime. It just blows your mind once. It just stays there because you always remember this for the fact that you had totally no idea about it. So such kind of knowledge is something very appreciative to gain, and I would recommend all of them who is hearing me right now to actually search more into getting knowledge that will actually blow your mind. But even as you get the knowledge, be sure to pray, because excess knowledge can drive us insane, as the old saying goes. So getting back into the topic, here King Saul, as I said, he had fallen out with God. For the unversed, let me just say, he was appointed king after the last judge Samuel was approached by the Israelites with the demand of having a king. So Samuel was a judge, prophet, a priest. So he served multiple positions, and he was a very close friend of God, I'll say, because God actually spoke to him many times. So once he appointed King Saul as the king of Israel, God continued to give King Saul messages, duties, instructions through Samuel. So once Saul did a wrong thing, but that was kept away. But another time, a very specific instruction was given to Saul, and Saul wouldn't heed to it completely. Actually, he didn't execute that duty perfectly well, and so that made him fall out with God. God just rejected him as king of Israel and told Samuel to shout out another man. So King Saul, over the years, even though he was rejected by God, he continued to be king until his death. So quite a few years later, Prophet Samuel, well advanced in ages, died. So Prophet Samuel died, and sometime after that, there was this Philistines, the Israelites, enemies back then, who actually camped up against them to fight a war. So when Saul saw this army, he was terrified, I'll say, because there was a war that was coming up, and Saul tried to inquire of the Lord about the success, or say the status of the war, because as I have told you earlier in the former episode, most of all the people actually wanted, or say most of the kings used necromancy to actually know the success or know the fate of certain high anticipated events. But here in this case, Saul was I'll appreciate Saul's first motion to seek God. Even after falling out with God, I appreciate his decision to first of all inquire of the Lord. But when God wouldn't answer him, and Prophet Samuel had already died by then and was buried, Saul was like, he was irritated. He was in a hurry because the enemies were already at hand. They could strike anytime, and he didn't want to keep trying. He didn't want to keep trying to contact God. or trying to make God speak to him, but rather he just told his men to get a wizard or a witch who actually practices necromancy. So we can actually see that Saul, who had banished such people from this kingdom before, Saul himself was going to one such person, one witch whom the men informed were in such a place. Saul went under a disguise, and when he reached there, he actually told the woman to bring up prophet Samuel. So, but when we read the Bible, we actually read that prophet Samuel was brought up. But when I have made a further study on this, you should understand a person who is dead cannot be brought up. That is one thing I would like to make clear. A dead person is a dead person. Death is a partition wall between two different worlds, the world of living and the world of dead. And so death parts one person from a world and transcends him to another world. When he enters another world, you can't bring him back to this world unless certain specific situations where you can see miracles of people who were dead. I personally know people who were dead rose up alive. Okay, so giving exceptions for such situations, anyone who had died cannot be brought up. So but then people who actually read the Bible of this portion of the Bible will actually be confused, because it is written prophet Samuel was brought up. But then I'll say first of all that prophet Samuel was a very holy person. He was a righteous man. He was walking according to God's will. And Saul was now consulting a witch who was a practitioner of necromancy. So necromancy was actually a black magic, and a black magician can never bring up such a person as Samuel. And so famous and quite guaranteed, quite genuine commentators have actually pointed out that the so-called prophet Samuel was not actually prophet Samuel. The person the witch claimed to have brought up. Okay, even though Saul had asked for her to bring up prophet Samuel, the prophet Samuel which was actually brought up was actually Satan, who had lied to be prophet Samuel, or say the lady had lied that it was prophet Samuel, because God had already forsaken him and he wouldn't answer him in any ways. So Bible commentators actually believe that it was in no way God would never in any manners allow one of his very best men to be brought up by a witch. So he the so-called Samuel who is there was not actually Samuel, but actually Satan, who was actually speaking to Saul about the after effects of the war. But still, the first thing that Samuel asked this Saul is actually, why have you disturbed my sleep? Why have you brought me up? So Saul answers, I'm sore, which actually shows the desperate situation Saul was in. Saul was in a situation like he was desperate to hear something about it, because he was at a stage where he was losing all his control, because people were already accepting David as king. Samuel was dead. God was not answering him. Philistines was camping against his camp and ready to fight a war. Saul was in a state of utter desperate and helpless moment, where he would actually do anything to know what his fate was. And we can actually read that the so-called Samuel, who is Satan, who had disguised and or say lied to Saul as Samuel, was actually telling Saul that Saul and his sons will die in the battle afterwards. So if you ask me, how did Satan know about such a person, such a thing that will happen in the future? We should understand that from the biblical perspective, both the good spirits and the bad spirits can actually know what comes up ahead to a point. But there are things that are hidden from these evil spirits by God. Such things can never be perceived by them, nor be understood by them, nor be narrated by them. So, the practitioners of necromancy always consult the evil spirits. So, necromancy is basically a black magic because they consult the evil spirits. When they come with the evil spirits have been actually living around this world for more than 1 billion years. So, they know most of everything that has happened in most of everyone's life. So, if a necromancer actually claims to bring up a person and tells you that this and this is the person you're searching for, or this and this is the person you asked for, that person actually talks to you like he knows you very well, believe him not, because a necromancer can never bring up a person who is dead. As I said, death is a partition wall between two different worlds, the world of living and the world of dead. So next scenario, I think it will they make things more bolder and better for you guys who are listening to me. The next situation we have is actually a story that is narrated by Jesus Christ himself while doing one of his public speeches, where he actually talks about a rich man and Lazarus. So this rich man was, as what Jesus called him, a rich man. He lived in his splendor, in the greatness of his riches, the abundance of his wealth. He actually lived a very glamorous life, whereas on his own house's doorstep lay a poor, sore and beggar-like person, a beggar indeed, whose name was Lazarus. So both of them, like every other humans, died. When Lazarus died, there was actually no one to bury him. When the rich man died, there was a big mourning. So the rich man, after death, went to the place of tormentation. When he reached the place of tormentation, he looked up and he saw that Lazarus was sitting in the lap of Father Abraham. So this rich man actually tries to strike up a conversation about Lazarus to Father Abraham, and they converse. And then the rich man actually asked Father Abraham to send Lazarus to his brothers. So this rich man had brothers who were actually living behind in earth, still in the riches that this rich man had left him. So they were living the very kind of life that the rich man was living, and the rich man didn't want them to end up in the same place as him. As he was a loving brother, I understand that emotion and I appreciate him for that, but he actually asked Abraham to send Lazarus, who was a dead person, to the living brothers of his, so that they can actually tell what had happened to the rich man and why they should repent and seek the good and right path. But then Abraham tells him that the brothers who are living in earth, have Moses and other prophets. So what do we understand from here is that Jesus was actually telling them that people should actually not disturb the dead, because the dead are dead and gone. As I repeated multiple times right now, death is actually a partition wall between two different worlds. God by no means wants the living to be dealing with the dead, as death is the finishing of all living creatures. And from then on, there's a separation. We are no more connected to them in any manner. So God actually highlights us to just deal with the living. Necromancy is actually wrong deed in the biblical outlook, as I've said, as I've highlighted, because a dead person can never be brought back unless and until God himself wants that soul to return to that body which was given and resume life. Unless otherwise, a necromancer, a practitioner of necromancy, be it a witch or a wizard, can never bring back a soul that had been separated from this world and transcended to another world. When I speak of this, let me just remind you also this: if you want to see someone, if you want to tell someone something, you want to love someone, you want to care for someone, you want to be with someone for some time, do it while they're alive, rather than just doing certain things for them, saying it is for them, after they died, because that is not going to do you nor them any good. Like, I bring to remembrance this many situations of children actually doing a lot of things for in the name of for their parents after those people have died, and never caring to even spend an hour for these very parents when they were yet alive and was seeking them. So God actually highlights that too, I guess. I would say I'll agree with that, because while we have the living among us, let us do to them the good that they would want us to do, and let us not deal with them after they are dead. And the other releases outlooks on necromancy will be continued in the coming episodes. I look forward to informating you more on this subject, as this is a very interesting subject as according to me. And there's a lot more that I would like to tell you, especially like the present people's outlook towards necromancy, how they so I'll be dealing with that in the coming episodes, and stay tuned to our content. This is a very sensitive content. Take it in that sense. Do not strike up any controversies or anything like that in the name of this. Let it all be informative. At the same time, let it not shake you in any manner, but let it actually give an enlightenment. Let it give you a new understanding to certain things that you've been reading and knowing for quite a long time. So this is what I have to say, and this is the biblical outlook. The Bible in no manner supports necromancy, and it believes, the Bible believes, Bible points out that necromancy is not genuine, is not real, but is a very influencing black magic that has been existence. Because you can see in the story of rich man and the Lazarus, the rich man actually asked Abraham to send Lazarus because he was sure that a dead man coming back to the living and telling them of things that has been happening in the world after death, that they will surely repent of their ways and come. That kind of a confidence was there in the rich man. So there we actually see the highlighting of how great an influence necromancy had on the society back then. So Bible in no manner supports practice of necromancy, but it shows us that necromancy existed, and it also highlights the influence of necromancy on the people that lived before us in history. That's all for today. Thank you for listening to me.